and I want to make sure we have enough time to get to it. So I want to welcome everyone to this fundraiser for Pakistan flood relief from SABA North America and the SABA North America Foundation. We've partnered with UNICEF again on this important endeavor. Obviously, although the Pakistan floods happened in the summer, there's still a lot of devastation and suffering happening. And we have two of our colleagues here from UNICEF here today, Mansi Mehta and Austin Chu, to describe what they're seeing on the ground and UNICEF's efforts to help ease that suffering and what we can all do to help. So we're doing this fundraiser to give you an opportunity to donate directly to help those in need through an organization that's reputable and effective in getting things done. And I'm going to actually turn it over to Sadia Masood, the president of the SABA North America Foundation, to discuss a little bit more about the event. And I realize I probably didn't say this before the recording started, after the recording started, but I'm Charan Brahma. I'm the president-elect of SABA North America. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Charan. I'm glad you introduced yourself. I was about to come back at you. You know, unfortunately, there hasn't been much by way of media coverage on this humanitarian crisis in Pakistan. So hopefully tonight, you know, with both Mansi and we can, you know, bring this of what's happening in Pakistan. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Mansi, who's the Director of Global Cause Partnerships at UNICEF, and her colleague, Austin Chu, Assistant Director of Global Cause Partnerships, are both here tonight to answer our questions and to tell us a little bit about the situation in Pakistan. A special shout out to Austin, who's joining us from Pakistan. So I think it is right now 6:05 a.m. his time. So we really appreciate him being here. And as Charan mentioned, I just want to quickly say that what SABA, the current president of the SABA Foundation, which is a 501c3 organization that provides support to nonprofit organizations across North America to different South Asian communities. Through grants, educational programming, and community connections, we support access to justice with a specific focus on issues related to domestic violence, hate crimes, and immigration. We also connect pro bono attorneys with opportunity, civil legal assistance to low-income South Asians. I in part say all of this to emphasize that the donations you make tonight are tax deductible. And while we're are having the program tonight, I'm tracking the donations as they come in, and I'm excited to say just as of today, and we opened the fundraising today, this effort today, we've raised $2,550. And I want to give a shout out because I just see that Tara Raghavan, who is the current president of SABA North America, has made 1,000. So thank you, Tara. We, SABA North America and SABA Foundation, are shooting to raise 40 funds that will go to the emergency aid that UNICEF is providing in Pakistan. And we plan to close out this fundraiser by the new year. So please donate. So what we're going to do tonight is start the program with Aisha, who was from Pakistan and working in Islamabad. And she's one of Mansi and Austin's colleagues. So we have a short video from her. That will play momentarily. There we go.
I'm Aisha Sabr, Senior Advisor and Team Lead in UNICEF's Public Partnerships Division, and I've just recently returned from Pakistan, where I visited several flood-affected districts in the province of Sindh. UNICEF has been working with partners to establish temporary learning centers in flood-affected districts in Pakistan to provide children with education services and supplies. When I was recently in Mirpur Khas district in the province of Sindh, I met Pooja, Jito, Meena, and Shamun. Pooja is 7 years old and wants to be a doctor. Jito is 6 years old, the same age as my son, and wants to be a teacher. Nina is also 6 years old and wants to be a policewoman. Shamoon is 6 years old and told me that she just wants to keep studying and learning. These girls were accessing education for the first time in their lives through UNICEF's temporary learning centers. With additional support and funding, UNICEF can help these girls and many children fulfill their dreams.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Aisha, for sharing that. And Monsi, I want to start with thanking you and Austin and your colleagues for all of the work that you're doing, which leads me to my first question. Could you tell us a little bit about UNICEF and what it stands for? I think folks would like to hear a little bit about that.
Hi, sure. I'm happy to answer that question. I just wanted to say before I dive into our fireside chat here, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for having me here and inviting me to speak. It's an honor to be here, and I know you'll hear a little bit more from Austin later, but I can speak on behalf of both of us when I just say that it really is meaningful to be here, and thank you for considering your support to UNICEF Pakistan's effort on the ground. So to go back to your question of what does UNICEF stand for, and just tell you a little bit more about UNICEF's history, I'll start by saying that actually UNICEF was founded in 1946 to respond to the needs of children following post-World War II Europe and just the aftermath that children were facing at the time. And it was formally called the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, hence the acronym that you see has the E in it. Over time, we actually dropped the E because we became an organization that was asked to serve the holistic needs of children, not just during an emergency, but essentially to be there before, during, and after an emergency. But the crux of UNICEF and how it was founded was really to serve the needs of children during that period of an emergency, when there was no other UN agency at the time that was dedicated to serving the needs of children. And then in 2020, of course, against the backdrop of the rising humanitarian needs, the COVID-19 pandemic, along with all the other disasters that were happening around the world, prolonged violent conflicts, large-scale population displacement, global hunger crisis. At the time, so back in 2020, UNICEF then, because of its expertise during emergency response, responded to about 483 emergencies throughout 153 countries at the time. As far as UNICEF and its work, the UNICEF has a presence in 190 countries and territories, and carries out programming across various different sectors, ranging from access to healthcare, nutrition, water sanitation, hygiene, HIV/AIDS, child protection, which encompasses protecting the rights of children, preventing trafficking, preventing child marriage from happening. And then we also have two cross-cutting sectors which impact each and every sector of UNICEF's work, and that is humanitarian aid and gender equity. I also think it's important to note here that UNICEF is the only UN agency that does not receive funds from the United Nations member states, and so it doesn't receive any dues, and it is solely relying on voluntary contributions. So that's the bit that I have to address your first question.
Thank you. And I think, and maybe you'll talk about this in a little bit, but the 1946 date kind of struck a chord with me, because I think UNICEF has been working in Pakistan since the early 1950s, if I'm correct? So you have been in Pakistan since the very beginning, the inception of UNICEF, which is really great.
Yeah, actually, I'll tweak that a little bit, and I'll say that we've been in Pakistan since 1948. Is that correct, Austin?
That's right, 1948.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's amazing. I wanted to jump to the side for a second. I've heard sometimes people say UNICEF USA, and then I've heard UNICEF. Like, Is there a difference between those two organizations, or are they two organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So UNICEF USA is essentially what we refer to as a national committee. So UNICEF has 34 national committees. So we are UNICEF USA operating in the US, rallying the support of the American public to raise funds, to support UNICEF's work on the ground, to raise awareness via advocacy efforts. So most developed nations have a national committee. So there's a UNICEF Canada, there's a UNICEF Italy, all over the globe, there's a UNICEF Iceland. And so essentially our sole purpose is to raise awareness and to raise funds and support for the programming that UNICEF is then able to do on the ground. So UNICEF USA is essentially its own nonprofit 501c3 organization. And it was created, we were the first one, UNICEF USA was created in 1947 to, again, just raise support for UNICEF's work and really just to advance the global mission that is of UNICEF's. And so we work with any organization, any individual corporation that is based here in the US.
Thank you. So would the donations tonight go to UNICEF USA, is that correct?
Yeah, so the donations would, any donation that is being given to UNICEF from anybody that's here in the US is channeled through UNICEF USA, then to UNICEF, which essentially goes then directly to the ground.
Could you tell us a little bit about UNICEF? I know you've given us there are a number of different entities throughout the world, partners, and maybe specific to Pakistan for folks to hear who the partners are in Pakistan.
Yeah, sorry, you cut off just a little bit. Did you ask who UNICEF partners with?
Yes, I did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, definitely happy to jump into that. So UNICEF has many different partners, but I'll start by saying that UNICEF's #1 partner, especially in the country, is always going to be the government. UNICEF cannot work in any country unless it's at the invitation of the government, unless the government approves of UNICEF being there in the country, because we really do view the government as being our partner when it comes to, you'll often hear us using the term boots and suits. So we have the boots that are worn by UNICEF staff on the ground because they're the ones going out into the field and implementing the programs. But you cannot be implementing the programs if you don't have the right policies in place. And I like to refer to the example of ending child marriage, for example. I mean, you can have as many people as you want out there in the field trying to create or trying to have interventions in place at the community level, but if the country itself is not going to put a policy in place to end child marriage or to ban child marriage at a certain age, then you're not going to be able to get any of the work done. So the #1 partner is the government, and other partners include what we refer to as implementing partners. So we work with the cream of the crop, local NGOs on the ground that already have the skills, already have the expertise, and are already doing the work. We're not there to reinvent the wheel or to put our flag there in the country or in the ground and say, no, this is just UNICEF's territory. But we work with, for example, we already work with the teachers who are already teachers on the ground, social workers or healthcare workers on the ground. And UNICEF has an entire vetting process in place to identify those organizations. And the funds that are given to UNICEF and to, let's say, UNICEF Pakistan are then also used to then dish out those funds to the implementing partners on the ground, because we're working hand in hand with them to develop curriculum, to develop programs in place, or even to train community health workers on the ground. So that's a bit about who we partner with on the ground.
That actually leads right into my next question for you. But before I do, I think I didn't mention that, and I'm sure everybody's seen in our backgrounds, we have QR codes that you easily donate to this fundraiser. I want to give a shout out to Oscar Saeed, who just donated $500 to the fund, to this. So thank you, Oscar. Going back to now what you just said, which I think in part you've answered, is a big question for everyone is why we chose to partner with UNICEF. I know why SABA and the foundation chose to work with you. We felt like it was the best situated in Pakistan to do the work and could have the largest impact. But could you, in your own words, tell us a little bit about what the value is for people to give to UNICEF to do the work in Pakistan?
Absolutely. Outside of me personally, just believing in the mission and the vision and everything that UNICEF stands for, it really does come down to the sheer scale and the reach that UNICEF has on the ground. You know, like I said earlier, UNICEF has a presence in 190 countries and territories. We've been in Pakistan since 1948. I mean, that's essentially right after UNICEF was even founded. So there is this trusted relationship that we have built in with the community members. You know, we are the largest humanitarian warehouse in the world. We're based in Copenhagen. We're the largest procurer of what we call ready-to-use therapeutic foods, which is essentially, it's a packet, and it basically is composed of peanut butter, but we're out there and we're providing that to children who are malnourished. We have, you know, global experts on the ground, and you'll hear more about this from Austin, but 75 to 80% of our staff on the ground are local citizens, nationals of the countries that they're working in. And they are pouring their blood, sweat, and tears every day into the work that they're doing. And they're there for the people. They are the people. And it's just this, it's this mutual respect, this collaboration that we have. Sometimes conversations are happening behind closed doors with the government because you're negotiating and there's a lot of pushback. And something that I didn't mention before, I meant to mention, is when in the past year, when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, the only remaining organization that was allowed to do the work that it was doing was UNICEF at the time, because of its negotiating abilities and power to speak to the government. Even though they may not agree at the time with who is in power, we're an apolitical organization, and we're, at the end of the day, we're there for children no matter what. So I think, you know, those are a few points. I could probably keep going for a while, but I'll stop there. And then, of course, if there are questions at the end, I'm happy to take some of them as well.
Absolutely. And that I'd like to tell folks there is a Q&A button. So if you'd like to submit any questions, I'll try to check it from time to time and bring any questions. But we will have time, 10 minutes or so towards the end of the program for Q&A. So just if any questions you have, we're happy to answer those. One concern, and this is, you know, so helpful to know all the different things and connections that UNICEF has in Pakistan. One concern that I have heard, which I wanted to ask you to directly address, is that donors are afraid or worried that their money that they're donating will not, or a portion of it, a large portion of it will not go directly to support families and children in Pakistan. My understanding is it's 84 cents of every dollar is going directly to Pakistan. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what happens with the remaining, if I'm doing my math right, 16 cents, and what it takes to do this work and support the families and children in Pakistan?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, and you're right on the money. It's 84 cents of every dollar spent is going to UNICEF programming directly on the ground. The remaining cents essentially are used to cover our basic operations, and it's, you know, UNICEF retention. Retention is applied to support the costs associated with implementing the programs and managing the funds. I mean, if you think about it, if you think of an emergency and how much how much resources, how much manpower is needed to get the items into the country, to work and figure out, okay, who do we need to tap into? Do we have enough community health workers on the ground? Do we have enough people who can then deliver these essential items out into the field, which sometimes takes days to travel into the locations that they're going to? And really, without the retention that is being used to cover the cost of the programming efforts and the cost of procuring the items and the materials, UNICEF really couldn't secure the best experts on the ground to design and implement the programs, the cost of transportation, essential goods and services, to train. And sometimes you're pulling in people who may not be completely trained as doctors, but have the skills to be health workers in other facets. And so training them to then go out and deliver the work on the ground. So it's other essential operations that are necessary to deliver the results for children.
Thank you. And the chat section also added in the UNICEF FAQ, as well as a transparency and accountability statement that gives you more information about all of the different costs and that Monty spoke to, and the funds and how they're being used.
Yeah. I just want to add one more thing to that, which is,
thank you.
Yeah, we have intense monitoring and evaluation. So our reporting is very robust. And so should you choose to give to UNICEF Pakistan, we do report out on what the impact of your funds, what the impact of your dollars looks like. And so once we get into the 6-month period, a full year period, we'll be able to report out on that to showcase exactly where your money is going.
Thank you. I see we have more donations coming in. Thank you so much to folks. After listening to all of this, I've decided I'm going to make a $500 donation. So I'm plugging it in right now as we speak. While you're speaking, Mansi, I'm making my donation. I don't know if I mentioned this, but my family is from Pakistan. And I remember being in Pakistan during flooding, certainly not like what folks are seeing here, but, you know, even I saw how hard it was for people, even with people with access to resources and support. I know everybody wants to hear more about the current situation. So in Austin, as I mentioned, you are in Pakistan right now. So Mansi, I'm going to turn it over to you and Austin to talk about the current situation there.
Yeah, from here, I will just turn it over to Austin and have him share his experiences with all of us.
All right. Thank you both, Sadia and Mansi. I think we have a short video clip to play first.
Hi, I'm Austin Chu, Assistant Director with UNICEF USA. I'm here in Rajanpur district in Punjab, and I've been here in country in Pakistan for the last 3 weeks. What I've seen here is unbelievable. As you can see, there's still water behind me in this village. Right after the floods, there were about 6 to 7 feet of water here. And even more than 2 months after, there's still standing water on the ground, despite it being a very hot place. A few weeks ago, I had the chance to visit District Jacobabad, where there's still several feet of standing water. Children and families are living right by the road next to the village, living in makeshift tents, completely exposed to the elements. Once again, it's still hot there, but soon winter will be coming. And here in Rajanpur, during the winter, it gets as cold as 0 or 1 degrees Celsius. While this water may seem calm, it presents many dangers hidden beneath the surface for children. If it weren't for UNICEF's response in providing safe drinking water, children would be tempted to drink this water. And it's the same water that water buffalo are openly defecating in. Children also continue to live in some of the villages, and they cross this water every day in order to reach their temporary learning centers. In the temporary learning center that we've set up, it's a place of joy. It's a tent with a tarp covering the floor, but inside, children are learning basic numeracy, literacy. They're drawing and they're working with different shapes. And for some children, this is the first time they stepped in an education center of any kind. Even before the floods, 1 in 3 children nationally were out of school. When I visited the Integrated Health and Nutrition Screening Center, I was shocked by the number of children that were admitted for severe acute malnutrition. In flood-affected areas, 1 in 9 children is facing SAM. This is higher than the WHO's threshold for a nutrition emergency, and the situation we're facing here is really critical. I'm told that because of the standing water, we've already lost this current planting season, and likely the next few planting seasons will be lost as well. And with that goes livelihoods and people's nutrition. More than 10 million children now need humanitarian assistance in Pakistan. UNICEF has appealed for $173.5 million to support our humanitarian response, and yet only 13% of that appeal is currently funded. That's where we need you. We need your support for flexible funding across all our sectors so that we can scale up our response in health, in nutrition, water and sanitation, education, and child protection.
All right, well, that was me. Here I am, beaming into your kitchens and living rooms live from Islamabad. So my name is Austin Chu. I am normally based in the US, in New York, and I work closely with Mansi and the Global Cause Partnerships team. And I've spent the last month on a stretch assignment in Pakistan, supporting the country office here, colleagues here with mobilizing resources for the emergency response. The first thing I want to say is that the scale of this crisis cannot be over exaggerated, and the cameras, videos, it really cannot do it justice. You may have seen over the summer on Instagram or in the media some video footage, maybe overhead footage that showed much of the land underwater. It's been almost 3 months since then, and there's still so much water. I can't even describe it to you, but then a third of the country was underwater, and it was an area the size of the country of Ireland. And what you saw in the video just now, it's just a small, very, very small portion of the water that still remains. Crop fields, villages still surrounded by water. To paint a picture, near Dadu City, which is one of the worst affected areas, I drove down a road, and we were driving for at least 5 minutes, maybe even up to 10 minutes. And it was surrounded by water on both sides, literally as far as you could see. And you might think that it was a lake. If there's a little air or some wind, you would see waves rippling on this water. And all of that water is from rain. They say here that it rained for days and days, and then those days turn into a month. And what's really sort of mind-boggling is that prior to the floods, many of the areas, especially in the southern part of the country, were being monitored for drought. In the areas that I mentioned, it's still, even now 85 degrees Fahrenheit in November. But in September, it was something like 100 or 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And there was concern prior to the floods that people's livelihoods would be affected if there wasn't enough water. And now we have the opposite concern, with 3 times the 30-year national average of rain having fallen. And with these really unprecedented floods, people have had their homes washed away, and with that, all their possessions. People have lost their livelihoods as livestock, fields are covered, and over 600 children have lost their lives as well. And in addition to that, much of the basic infrastructure has been affected, 32,000 schools and nearly 1,500 public health facilities. So the human toll is really unprecedented. It's much worse. It's worse even than the floods that were here in 2010. And it is truly the most vulnerable who are bearing the brunt of the sort of consequences of these floods. And it's also worth noting that even before the floods, the children in the hardest hit districts were already facing multiple deprivations. And so these floods are adding crises on top of crises, really exacerbating the situation And as I mentioned in the video, now 20.6 million people are in need of some form of humanitarian assistance, and almost half of that are children. As Mansi mentioned, so UNICEF has been in Pakistan since 1948 with our basic services and programs, including education, health, nutrition, and also providing humanitarian assistance during emergencies. So in response to the recent floods, UNICEF has been on the ground, before, during, and after emergencies. But as soon as the floods happen, we've activated immediately, working with government and local partners, as Mansi mentioned, to deliver life-saving aid. So we already had field offices in all 4 of the affected provinces. And in response, we've quickly set up 4 different emergency hubs, as well as 5 additional field offices to deploy our staff as close to the flood affected areas as possible. I also want to mention that we've had 70 people come on what we call surge support from around the world. Many of our staff who are able to bring some expertise or provide extra capacity for the country office colleagues here. And many of our surge staff who have come have been of Pakistani descent themselves. There was a huge need for Urdu speakers. And of course, for those who were able to come, I think it was, they wanted to do what they could, of course, to help their own homelands. But out of the government has declared 90 districts as calamity hit, and UNICEF is present in 55, including all of the 34 priority districts. And in many areas, in the areas that I've seen, UNICEF is the only agency that is there on the ground. But through pre-positioning supplies such as therapeutic food, essential medicines, and hygiene kits, we were able to release and act immediately, supply those supplies to the flood affected areas. We've already delivered $14.5 million worth of those supplies. I had the chance to visit our supply warehouse in Karachi, and was able to see how we're able to efficiently both procure and to distribute these items at scale. In fact, our RUTF is in the last few years, we've moved to a manufacturer who's local here in Pakistan to drive down the cost, but also increase and accelerate the speed with which we're able to procure.
Can I just, Austin, sorry,
okay.
I was just going to say RUTF is what I mentioned before, ready to use therapeutic food. Just wanted to say that. So.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up because we had a question come in while you were speaking. How is UNICEF providing clean water and other items to children?
Yeah, good question. So, as I mentioned, we do have a presence on the ground through both our sort of emergency hubs, as well as our staff, our program staff, and others who are going to communities every day. I'll say that in terms of our core humanitarian assistance, right now we are facing a sort of mixed blended settings, right? So there are still people who are living in makeshift tents along the road or living even in tent cities and camps. And then others have been able to return to their own villages, right? So depending on what the situation is, that will adapt to how we deliver, the safe water, other supplies, et cetera, right? As I mentioned, in the days after the floods, we were immediately able to distribute through our sort of supply and logistics team those essential, life-saving items. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it did. And we just had another follow-up. What else can SABA do to amplify UNICEF's efforts in Pakistan other than this program?
Yeah,
and Mansi, that might be another one for you as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. And Austin, feel free to jump in from your experience on the ground as well. So the best way that you can support is by supporting monetarily through this fundraiser, especially during an emergency. The staff on the ground are kind of just trying their best to assess the needs on a day-to-day basis, and those needs are constantly changing. And so in this moment, during a prolonged emergency, funds are what is most critical. And like I mentioned before, so, UNICEF's partnerships on the ground are with local NGOs, local faith-based leaders, local women leaders of the community. And then from here, from the US, we do have advocacy efforts. We have awareness raising. So if you want to, we have a whole social media toolkit, which you can then utilize and share. So there's using your own voice and raising awareness that way via our advocacy efforts. So if you're interested in supporting UNICEF in that way, outside of Pakistan flood relief, we're happy to share. Maybe I could share it through you, Sadia, or through Yaz, and just, share a few ways that you can get involved in supporting UNICEF. We have a whole volunteer council, we have a board, so I can share some of that information after this event. I hope that answered your question.
No, that's great. And I'm just going to jump in for a second, and then I'll turn it back to Austin. I thought this might be a good time, and this was something that we posted on our social media, but to give folks a idea of where the money, how the money will be used by UNICEF, and how much the donation go. For just $12, you can, UNICEF is able to provide hygiene kits, which includes soap, sanitizer, detergent, cloth, underwear, etc., for 3 months for one family. For $40, you can provide a back-to-school backpack filled with writing and learning materials. For $55, you provide a carton of 150 sachets of ready food, RUTF, that could treat one child with severe wasting for 6 to 8 weeks. $175 can provide a school in a box, which has materials for an entire classroom of 40 to 50 children, including a clock, markers, an inflatable glue, that kind of thing for different kinds of lessons. And $3,100 can provide a 43-meter tent, which can hold up to 12 people. So I thought this would be a nice moment to just mention the different things and where your money could go to help Pakistani families and children. One other question that has just come in is, we've been talking a lot about children, and I know millions of children have been impacted by the floods. Is UNICEF's focus on children and their families, or does it help other adults as well? If the former, how do you make sure aid isn't diverted?
Yeah, I can start, and Monsi can also chip in. So UNICEF has an equity approach. Our mandate is, to focus on the most vulnerable, and often that does mean children, but that also includes supporting adolescents. So UNICEF, we define children as under age 18, children, adolescents, but it also does include supporting women, especially pregnant and lactating mothers. But when it comes to some of our core humanitarian assistance, like providing safe drinking water, that is for the whole community, right? Because everyone needs to be able to drink safe water. But with much of our programming, like on nutrition, health, and education, we do have a focus on children because of that equity approach and our mandate. And then in terms of how we sort of ensure that aid isn't diverted, we talked a little bit about partners, but as part of our sort of routine monitoring evaluation, we will sort of do rigorous monitoring, that includes spot checks, but also reports, and working closely with our partners to understand the current situation. And so, in fact, last week I was with the chief of health and chief of WASH as they visited programming in the communities, and they were there to see how the programming is going, how the partners are implementing, and provided on the spot feedback for implementing partners, really local NGOs, to sort of slightly adjust their programming this way or that way to be more effective and to really ensure that we're being efficient and effective. And the other thing to add is that we are coordinating very closely with the local government here at all levels. But on the district and community level, we are coordinating to ensure that there's no duplication of resources, right? Is to ensure that all of UNICEF's resources, limited resources, are being used to the sort of utmost. Ensure that our role is filling critical gaps. And then with support of the government as well, we're also coordinating within sectors. So coordinating with other partners that are also involved, for example, in WASH or in education, where we're the sector lead. And so again, through these coordination mechanisms, we're able to ensure that, all our resources are used really efficiently, and it's really going to where it's needed the most.
Monty, I don't know if you had anything to add, but we did have one more question come in.
Yeah, I'll just add one more piece to everything Austin said, which is, while we do have this equity-based approach, our belief is also that when you're helping the child, you're also helping the community and you're helping the families as well. And one example that comes to mind is often, part of my role is I work directly with women's organizations and in support of women empowerment, girl empowerment programs. When girls are left out of school or when girls are forced to drop out of school, UNICEF works with the families to provide something that we call cash assistance programs. So we provide cash to specific families that meet a specific threshold. And there are contingencies involved, right? So the reason why they're choosing to keep the girl out of school is because they're choosing the boy child over the girl child, and the girl child is left to do chores or is married off at an earlier age. So when you're giving the families this cash assistance, it helps them meet basic needs and then allows them to understand the importance of continuing to allow their girl to go to school. So essentially, we try to provide care to the child to adolescence to allow them to thrive into adulthood, and then also support the families at hand as well through those means.
Thank you. I think both of you have mentioned this at one point or another, but had another great question come in, which I think follows along with the last question, was, does UNICEF make long-term infrastructural investments, or is it crisis management? I don't know if Austin or Monty, which of you would like to take that one?
Do you want to take that, Austin?
Yeah, I can start. So I'll speak specifically to the situation in Pakistan. So it's a really good question. I think it's, so yes, we do have a focus on responding immediately to sudden onset disasters like this one, again, providing critical life-saving support. We do have, some small role in early recovery. So I wouldn't necessarily call it infrastructure in the traditional sense, but so as more and more, just to give an example, as more and more people are moving back to their villages, away from camps and sort of tent cities, right? So UNICEF is moving our interventions from, for example, temporary latrines that we've dug or trucking water to more permanent solutions that involve restoring and rehabilitating the facilities that were already there, rehabilitating health facilities, the sanitation and water facilities, as well as education. And that means, restoring schools, restoring the toilets, the latrines in hospitals and in schools, right? Helping to rehab some health clinics or for example, the maternity ward in a certain hospital. And the reason we do this is it's actually more cost-effective and sustainable in the long run. To take this approach than to continue with temporary solutions. And ultimately, our goal is to ensure that these basic essential services are able to continue as people go back to their villages. And so we're working at all three levels. So on the sort of community level, on the institution level, as well as the individual household level to try and reach, as our tagline is for every child, is really to try and reach every child with these things that we believe that every child has a right to, to their health, to their water, to education. And so that does require working on a systems level approach, but it's both, again, community level, which might look like rehabilitating a water filtration system or even water supply scheme, all the way to the individual household level, which might be sort of ensuring that a hand pump or a tap from the main line is sort of restored, if that makes sense. But want to also turn it over to Monsi to add.
Thanks, Austin. Yeah, I think you covered most of it. The only thing I would add is, I think I mentioned this earlier, but UNICEF is there before, during, and after an emergency. And we also have a core program in place called disaster risk reduction. So I'll kind of share just a snippet from big picture overview, but we do plan for long-term investment. The programs that we have in place, from all sectors, from nutrition, education, water, sanitation, hygiene. The purpose of it is really to support the child at every stage into adulthood. So it's a long haul, it's a long-term game. And when an emergency happens, we have a very specific team in place to manage that emergency. And of course, as you heard from Austin, sometimes staff come in to provide extra support, but the hope is that there is a plan. There's always should be a plan in place if and when an emergency does happen, to kind of tap into that, but simultaneously plan for the future and the present. I mean, children will still continue to need an education even during an emergency. So yeah, just wanted to add that bit into it as well.
Yeah, and sorry, Monsi, you remind me of something as well, is when we're looking at sort of restoring access to these services, we're also at the same time looking at doing it in a way that is climate resilient and it's sustainable, right? So, for example, if something was, impacted by the floods this time, like a hand pump, right? How can we restore the hand pump in a way that if there's another flood, that it won't, that'll be able to withstand that, right? The simple things actually that don't require that much additional investment, just the right mindset. For example, just raising a hand pump by, a few feet, right, is enough in most areas for it to be able to withstand floods the next time it comes. Same thing when it comes to looking at sort of restoring health facilities and schools, right? Is, often good programming is also sort of resilient and sustainable as well. But the other element I wanted to mention is that even though, we sort of talk about our work through these programs and in different sectors, and we'll divide into, say, health and water and nutrition, often we are taking a holistic and a community level approach to our response, so an integrated approach. And I just wanted to share a powerful example I heard last week, which is, there's in some areas, people may need to travel up to 10 or even 15 kilometers to the nearest functioning health facility. And in some cases, some health facilities have reopened, but maybe they don't have running water and they don't have a sanitation facility that's working, right? And I heard our regional health advisor, Dr. Rene, say that, it doesn't make sense for an expecting mother to travel the 10 or 15 kilometers to then deliver in a facility that doesn't have running water, right? Because they say clean water, clean birth, right? So when we're looking at sort of this response and recovery, we need to really look at the whole picture. And if we're restoring the health facility, that a critical part of that is looking at the water and the sanitation aspect, right? So our health and WASH teams are together doing joint assessment as well as sort of joint plans on how to do that in a good way. And the same applies for schools, by the way, right? It doesn't make sense for children to go to school in a facility without working and gender separated latrines, right? If they go to school, and even if they go to school working WASH, but in their homes, in their villages, they don't have working running water and adequate sanitation, then they won't be sort of able to uphold good hand washing, hygiene, and habits kind of throughout their day, right? And then maybe a final example I'll draw is for children that are facing severe acute malnutrition. If they drink unsafe water and they end up having acute watery diarrhea, it puts them at further risk for malnutrition or even death. And so, maybe they come and they got treated for malnutrition, but if there isn't also a water kind of response provided for that community, then we'll see them back in the nutrition treatment center, and they'll need other sort of health interventions as well. So just wanted to kind of share those as examples of just to illustrate our response, as well as the importance of sort of this integrated community level approach.
Thank you, Austin. As you both are speaking tonight, the donations are just rolling in. So I really, this is really helpful to give us more context and more information on, how the donations are being used, what's happening in Pakistan. Austin, I know I started a flurry of interrupted you talking about your personal experience in Pakistan or the situation on the ground. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to finish if there's something that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance for.
Yeah, maybe the last thing I'll share is that I've just been personally really inspired by seeing our colleagues here in action. It truly is, every single colleague here is, the words for every child. It's not just words to them. I see it in their dedication on a daily basis. I see it in how we are pushing the government, pushing our local partners, and also advocating with the international community for support, but also for reaching as many children as we can with these basic rights, really. And so I see people really living those words for every child every day. If I could share maybe one example, I met a Dr. Ayaz Hussain, who's from Pakistan. He's from actually province of Sindh, Khairpur district. He's been working on our health program here for years. In May, he actually took an international position with UNICEF Lao and moved his whole family there. But when the floods happened, he brought his family back. They'd just gotten settled, I think 1 or 2 weeks in school. And of course, there was no other choice really, but for him to come back, and to offer his extra capacity, his expertise. He knew all of the people, he from having worked locally here for years and grown up in Khairpur district. But he's here for 3 months. He's helping to coordinate the health response. And so hearing his story and how, he pulled his children out of school now, and, they're back in school in Pakistan until December, and they'll go before they go back in January. But people like Dr. Ayaz just have been so inspiring. And so it's really seeing their work, seeing those people that also helps me keep going, and I think helps others. So, on behalf of them as well, I wanted to say thank you to all of you at South Asian Bar Association for choosing to support People of Pakistan with UNICEF. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Austin. We have one other video to share, folks. This is from Adrish, who's also lives in Pakistan and who's working in the Sindh area, or I think he lives in the Sindh area as well. He had some words to share with everyone as well.
I'm here in the southern tip of Pakistan. Most of this area is flooded. It was flooded due to the torrential rains, and now some of the water that is coming from the rivers is also expected to touch down different areas in this side of the country. As you can see behind me, these are basically, far in the distance too. They were all communities, villages, and so much that has been pretty much flooded. And now, as we walk through, you can see that this is a makeshift camp that has been created basically by the community members themselves, and much of these flood-affected people are here by themselves, and they haven't received a lot. But now we have brought here, as of today, some hygiene kits and some drinking water, clean drinking water that has been tested as well. It's mostly communities that belong to villages nearby, and they have whatever livestock they could save, whatever things they could pick up as the floods raged through their villages. I've traveled in the northwestern province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and we could see highways and roadsides filled with these makeshift camps. And this is the same in Sindh as well, which is the southern part of Pakistan. You can see most of these flood-affected persons are actually children and women.
Thank you. Mazi and Austin and your colleagues, Adrish and Aisha, we can't express how grateful we are for all of the work you're doing to help in Pakistan with the humanitarian crisis there. I also want to thank the folks that came to this program and donated money. Of this call, I keep looking, we've raised $4,000. The QR codes are in the back, and in the chat also, I think there was a link to donate, and you can always go to the SABA Foundation website as well to donate. So we really appreciate your giving. This is our first day, and we plan to continue to fundraise till the end of the year. So please encourage your friends and your family. I know I've already hit up my family for a couple of things, so I'm still working on that, but I want to, encourage everyone to please give and support the work that UNICEF is doing in Pakistan. And Mansi, I think you also wanted to maybe wrap it up, or I know we're at the
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you.
I'm happy to wrap us up. I just wanted to extend a thanks to you, Sadia, for, I know we've been in communication for a couple of months now, and it was such a pleasure to talk to you and to meet Yaz and others, and just be able to be here and speak to all of you. I want to say thank you to all of the SABA members for considering to donate to Pakistan flood relief via UNICEF. Any questions that you do have that come up over the next few weeks into the next month, please feel free to reach out. You can, maybe you can reach out to Sadia, who can connect with me to share some of those questions. Of course, Austin as well, while he's there in the field. And I will be sure to follow up with additional information about how to partner with UNICEF in other ways. So thank you again so much. And it was an honor to be here and be able to speak with all of you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for giving us your time tonight. And I hope you have a good week. Thank you.